Hello, and welcome to my presentation, Using Trauma-Informed Teaching Practices to Demonstrate Culture of Care in the Classroom, Suggestions for Online Higher Educators. My name is Dr. Cara Metz. I have been working in higher education for 12 years, and I have been a licensed clinical mental health counselor for 19 years. Today, I'm combining my worlds to examine how we can create a classroom that is trauma-informed to help all students have a better chance to succeed. The objectives for this presentation are to understand what trauma-informed education is, 2, to understand trauma-informed practices educators can use in an online classroom, and finally 3, to connect the culture of care with trauma-informed education practices. As I begin this presentation, I want to make known that as educators, it is not our responsibility to diagnose or be a therapist to our students. This presentation is to inform you about the possible impact of trauma in a classroom, as well as provide ideas to create a classroom that can support learners who might be struggling with the impact of trauma without you even having to know. Before we get into what trauma-informed education is, let's talk about why it's important. I think it's fitting to have a definition of trauma because first, understanding what trauma is, as well as its impact on people's daily lives, is important to becoming a trauma-informed educator. According to the American Psychological Association, trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event, like an accident, crime, natural disaster, physical or emotional abuse, neglect, experiencing or witnessing violence, death of a loved one, war, or another event. Trauma can be experienced not just from events we have witnessed in person, but also through our media sources. Trauma can happen at an individual or group level and at any of our ecological systems, such as interpersonal, community, or national and global levels. Trauma does not go away once the event is over. The impact of the event endures. Even when a person is away from the trauma, they can still experience an emotional response due to it. Not everyone is impacted by trauma in the same way either. Some trauma can lead to diagnoses such as post-traumatic stress disorder, acute stress disorder, and anxiety. When trauma happens at a young age, sometimes children might develop reactive attachment disorder, which is when they struggle to form stable attachments to caregivers or others in their lives, and it can impact them into adulthood. More controversially, dissociative disorders can also occur, where a person might break off from reality in an effort to protect themselves. However, not all people go on to develop a condition that meets the criteria for a diagnosis, yet they still are impacted by a traumatic experience. In fact, people might not even make the connection between trauma and its impacts. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration addresses impacts such as the inability to cope with everyday stressors, struggling to trust, being able to regulate memory, attention, thinking, and even behavior, losing control over how we express our emotions. We might become numb, be physically, emotionally, and mentally exhausted, or feel on edge. Trauma can be a one-time event, but it can also be a chronic state of life, like living in an abusive household. Trauma is a perception Not everyone will experience trauma from the same event. This is why it is important to not judge how a person reacts, especially if it is different from you. Different research studies report different numbers, but it is estimated that between 70% and 90% of all adults have experienced at least one traumatic event within their lifetime. That means more than half of people experience at least one trauma event. Knowing this, it is very likely that at least several of your students have a trauma experience. While trauma impacts us all differently, we know that it is possible for trauma to impact our learning. Trauma quite literally changes our brain. It can impact our ability to gain new information and store it. In a 2011 study by Burke et al., they found that students who had 4 or more adverse childhood experiences had some struggles related to learning. Trauma impacts learning and often has been linked to being a predictor of learning impairment and academic failure, as well as decreased engagement. Trauma reactions can pop up when a person feels stressed or overwhelmed. It triggers the fight or flight response in our brains. This means that seemingly small events might cause big reactions in some people. Although a person has trauma, this is not how they define themselves. A student might be struggling, but you might never know, especially in an online classroom. It is not something they bring up, it is not something they share. Others might share freely. It all depends on the person. Creating a trauma-informed online classroom is a way to demonstrate care. At UAGC, we have an open enrollment environment. This means that we want to see that all students interested in receiving an education be able to access our school. Once they are in, we want to help students feel included and valued and provide the support needed to help students have the best opportunity for success while ensuring we maintain high academic standards. It is important to remember that an educational environment can be stressful. In addition, many students are not just dealing with school stressors. Life doesn't pause when students are in school. I know personally, my students have experienced housing and food insecurity, deaths of close relatives like partners, parents, and friends, or maybe have had to deal with a sick loved one. School cannot and should not be their first priority in these situations. Juggling work, life, and school can be a difficult balancing act, which can again increase the stress that a person experiences. To demonstrate care in the classroom, we should develop practices that are proactive instead of reactive to trauma and other experiences students bring into the classroom. This can create a welcoming and caring environment for all, which sets up an environment for students to have the best opportunity to achieve success. A trauma-informed classroom creates safety, transparency, and trustworthiness, includes peer support, collaboration and mutuality, empowerment and choice, and includes ideas that relate to humility, individuality, and responsiveness. Let's take a look at these 6 areas in a bit more detail. Although I talk about the 6 areas separately, it is important to note that many of the ideas can fall into several categories. For example, having flexibility and empathy with students can be considered a way to create safety, mutuality, and a way to demonstrate humility and responsiveness. I will try to highlight ideas in each category, but the categories are fluid and work with one another. I try to provide a comprehensive list of what you might do to create a trauma-informed classroom. Ask yourself which ideas are the most important and which techniques you think you can implement. You might even have your own ideas about how to demonstrate these ideas in your classroom. This is not an exhaustive list, but it is to help spark discussion and inspiration. We have to balance our own self-care with supporting our students. Keeping ourselves well is a key aspect. A trauma-informed classroom creates safety. The goal is to create a sense of both physical and psychological safety for our students. I will spend a significant amount of time on safety. This is really the foundational aspect of creating a trauma-informed classroom. If a student doesn't feel safe, they will really struggle to learn. We can create safety in a number of different ways. A key way an instructor can do this is to actively listen and provide empathy and unconditional positive regard for students. Empathy means you try to put yourself in the shoes of your students with their experiences to reflect back content and emotions. Instead of saying something like, "I'm sorry to hear that," you could say, "It sounds like things feel pretty overwhelming right now," or "It sounds like you were really struggling." Students feel heard and that their experiences are not diminished. Remember when I said that we all experience situations differently? This is where empathy is key. We try to understand why the student is reacting and feeling like they are, even if we might not consider the situation overwhelming. We have to understand the student's perspective. Unconditional positive regard can create a feeling of safety because it demonstrates that you believe that your student is capable of reaching their educational goal. You might provide feedback, but they understand it is not because you do not believe in them and their abilities, but rather you want to help them grow to their potential. Grading should be informative, not judgmental, keeping in mind a growth mindset. Affirming strengths genuinely, going beyond just good job or you met the expectations. Remember, learning new things is risky, and past learning experiences might not have always felt safe. We have a chance to get it wrong. We might misunderstand. When you provide feedback, how might you convey a message of safety? How might you create an environment where it feels safe to make a mistake? In an online classroom, most interactions are done through written text. This can often be misinterpreted, especially with regard to tone. Tone is one thing that people who have experienced trauma are especially attuned to. You might consider providing a lecture or video about feedback. I know I like to post a video I created that talks about how feedback might cause anxiety, what it does to our brains, as well as ways students can overcome some of that anxiety and put themselves in a place where they are receptive to hearing what they are doing great and where they can improve. This can help students learn to overcome some of that feedback anxiety. Another idea to help students with feedback is providing an oral narrative to accompany written text, which can be helpful in interpreting tone. Further, making comments on appreciating the effort while explaining how to improve can be another way to provide critical feedback in a way that students feel safe to hear about their areas of growth. Flexibility is another way when we can create safety in a classroom. When we have rigid rules, we show that we do not understand circumstances or unexpected events. We can also alleviate barriers to our flexibility. For example, by doing things like not expecting proof of why someone needs extra time, we alleviate a worry or anxiety about being believed or having the ability to produce proof. By doing these things, students feel they have the ability to talk to their instructor about what is happening and feel believed. We create a classroom where people do not feel punished for unforeseen life situations. Next, pay attention to red flags. If you see a red flag, reach out. What are red flags? If a student start to miss deadlines when they were punctual before, or the quality of work changes, these can be red flags. Disposition changes can also be another sign that something is happening within the student. Another red flag is seeing a student who is constantly struggling with completing things on time, especially if they do not reach out. Sometimes when you effectively build safety, students might just come out and tell you what they are struggling with. Who can you go to at your university, and who can you point the student to? If your university provides a counseling center for students, make an announcement of its availability or let students know personally that it's there for them. Do not tell students they need to go, but let them know that you don't know if they need it or not, but it is available for them. Does your university have resources available if they're experiencing hardships? If you notice a student is struggling throughout a course, let the student know about disability services and how they might be able to help students through accommodations. By paying attention to struggles, we can provide the safety of resources. Reaching out to students to ensure they are okay can go a long way. Never underestimate the power of sending a message to see what's going on or how a student is doing. Speaking of reaching out, another way to demonstrate safety is to send out personal emails each week to check in with students and make sure they're okay. This goes to relationship building, which is a key to building safety. Keeping track of students and what they have shared, and understanding that the impact might not just be one day or a 1-week incident. Checking in with students lets them know they can feel safe and cared for in the classroom. Another way to help improve safety felt in the classroom is to teach self-care. Students should find an activity that relaxes them. Maybe it's mindfulness or deep breathing, or maybe it's something unique to them, like a hobby. If they can find something that helps create calm, the natural state of the stressfulness of education can be reduced. Sometimes people need a reminder of how balance and making time for themselves can make them more productive. Letting yourself be seen can improve the feelings of safety. Create videos of yourself doing lectures or introductions. When students can see the instructor, they can begin to form more of a connection and know you are there. In an online environment, you can lose that personability. Finally, be imperfect. It is not that you have to be imperfect intentionally, but do not hide the fact that you sometimes make mistakes. When I create videos, I might leave in a blooper or stumble over a word. I encourage students to let me know if they disagree with something or if I make a mistake. Showing that I'm human, I make mistakes, I demonstrate humility. Demonstrating our humanness and our imperfection creates a space where students know that they are not expected to be perfect and that mistakes are allowed. Next, we have transparency and trustworthiness. Here, you want to create an environment where the course is conducted with transparency. This means that expectations of students are provided upfront. In addition, let students know what their expectations can be of you, like when you will get grading back, how fast you return emails, or how you approach feedback. Create announcements that talk about course expectations and discuss expectations of assignments, discussions, and other work in the classroom weekly so students know what to expect. Consistency is also important. This can mean consistency with course assignments and due dates. Pre-planning and schedules can help students feel trust and predictability. This can mean consistency in getting grades back before a new assignment is due and being in the class regularly. If it is an online course, this means showing you are present throughout the week, whether it is grading, posting announcements, being in the discussion board, or answering emails. This might sound obvious, but if you say you will do something, then you should do it. This might mean following through with responses to students, but it also means that you follow through with the expectations you tell the class they can expect from you. This also means we have to care for ourselves. And if something on our end is happening, to interrupt our consistency, to let students know about it. Demonstrating care for ourselves can help give students permission for their own self-care. When there is confusion with instructions, miscommunications, or the course feels inconsistent, stress levels of students can increase and trigger trauma responses. We cannot avoid stress, but we can do our part to reduce it as much as possible. If there's a common mistake, let the entire class know. If you find a mistake, create an announcement or email so students can be on the lookout for how to approach it when they see it. We can even try transparency and trustworthiness to safety. Having a predictable learning space feels comfortable, familiar, and safe. Try to create predictability across courses in a program. As an instructor, try to have the same standards throughout the class. Create consistency on how courses look and navigate throughout a program. Now we look at peer support. Social support can be a protective factor. When students feel connected, they feel confident, comfortable, and safe. Think about how you can engage students in quality social interactions. Are there clubs or groups that students can associate themselves with? Making these known to students. Can you create meaningful and respectful dialogue in class? Another way to encourage peer support would be to have weekly check-ins and announcements or a discussion post. Have fun prompts and encourage students to find others who have similar or maybe even different responses to explore that idea more. Maybe you ask students to post a poem or song that best represents their current mood. Ask a poll question to break the ice, or create something silly like posting a meme that represents their weekend, or if they were weather, what type of weather would they be? This helps to lower anxiety for the week. By creating a context that has less pressure, students can feel free to explore connections and find people who can be supportive. Another way to build connections is to create discussion posts where students can help one another to develop or refine an idea. You can have peer reviews of content, have classmates look at for resources to help students support their peer, or have a student create content and a peer interaction with it, such as one student creating a case study and the other students answering questions about it. This helps students feel strong and capable in their abilities and creates a more robust and interpersonal interaction. We can also look beyond the experience of status quo with discussions and assignments. Instead, we can look for ways to include synchronous activities where students can connect. Maybe this means a synchronous online lecture, a social meetup, group office hours, or a synchronous discussion in place of a follow-up discussion post. This can also mean providing ways students can approach collaborative work. Maybe they create video responses to one another. By finding ways that students can connect more personally, we can create a sense of connection. Collaboration and mutuality are important pieces to a trauma-informed approach. We want to recognize and acknowledge the inherent power differences between the instructor and the students, while also working to demonstrate a sharing of responsibilities and expertise. When we enter into discussions with students, we should enter into them as equals. We are walking with the students through their educational journey instead of leading them. We each bring importance to the table. While I might bring my expertise in the subject, a student might bring in their experiences. I'm always open to my own growth, learning, and humility when working with students. Collaboration can also mean providing second chances. For example, if a student does not do well on an assignment, or maybe there are some issues with plagiarism, providing a second chance to do the assignment, learn from their mistakes, and grow from the experience. I understand that we cannot always learn to ride our bikes on the first try. Sometimes it takes multiple attempts. This again shows the student that you will work with them to learn and grow instead of creating a power structure. Ask yourself, how do you create a dialogue with your students about growth, learning curves, and how to meet their goals? Collaboration and mutuality can also include being attuned to your students. We want to recognize behaviors that are out of the ordinary and respond with empathy. When a student turns in an assignment late or maybe misses a deadline, take the approach of inquiry instead of an enforcer. Personally, if I see an assignment is missing, I reach out to a student, let them know I missed their assignment, and ask if things are okay. I ask if it's an oversight or if something happened. In this respect, I'm demonstrating that I want to work with the student to understand what is happening and remediate the issue if possible. This is where the idea of flexibility comes back. Having flexibility means you are willing to work with students to achieve success. The impact of empowerment of voice and choice cannot be overlooked. Here, we want to recognize the strengths of our students, build on them, and provide the power of choice. Part of this can be to have students reflect on their learning and to see how their learning impacts themselves as well as the impact they can have on the world. Students can be empowered by what they are learning and seeing how they can use it in their own lives. Assigning journals that ask students to do this reflection can be an important part of the learning experience. Another area of consideration is to think about how you can bring choice into the classroom. It can be a choice of topics to write an assignment about or choices of formats, so students can choose a format to complete their assignment that they feel would best be able to demonstrate their knowledge. Students can choose how they want to communicate with their instructor. Having more than one way to get a hold of or meet with the instructor can help to break down barriers and allow students to reach out in ways they feel comfortable with and that they believe will best be able to gain an understanding of what they need. Bringing back an idea from peer support, think about what activities can happen in a classroom that allows students to recognize and use their strengths and skills to help others. By feeling empowered to act in a way they feel confident, students can know what they bring to the classroom, which helps them not feel so overwhelmed when they also have to learn or try something new. Another way to provide choice is to ask students about their abilities to get work accomplished. If a student needs an extended deadline or gets sick, get the student's input on a timeline to get work in and not fall behind. Help them develop the plan for success instead of creating one for them. At the beginning of a course, you can demonstrate empowerment and choice by asking the student how you can best support them. Maybe you do this through an email or having students take a survey so you can shift certain aspects of teaching to help various students. Lastly, for empowerment and choice, have students develop rules of classroom conduct. Students can voice their needs and identify the boundaries they feel are important. This also helps a student feel safe. Finally, we should understand the role of humility, individuality, responsiveness, and culture. Students bring with them a wealth of knowledge and lived experiences into the classroom. This means they bring in lessons they have learned, various experiences that might differ from other classmates and the instructor, knowledge of their growth and what they're capable of. But also, sometimes they might be having a day where they bring their trauma, or at least their trauma reactions, into the classroom. As educators, we do not want to diminish the experiences of and feelings of our students. We want to respond to the needs of our students. As I have talked through the 6 various trauma-informed classroom ideas, I have worked on demonstrating the power of curiosity. I do not want to go into a situation assuming intent. I cannot possibly know what a student is going through or what experiences they bring in, especially when dealing with adult learners who are spread out across the United States. I go into a classroom discussion or interpersonal communication with a sense of openness to demonstrate my desire to understand. I do not make assumptions. Here is another place where empathy works very well by not inserting our feelings and reactions, but rather trying to understand what students are bringing in. Another example of this is being able to admit what you do not know, demonstrate that you're open to hearing from others, and admit when you're making a mistake. I often try to stay away from statements like "I understand" because I do try to empathize, but never walking in their shoes means I can never truly understand a student's situation. I talked about flexibility before. Flexibility means that I understand that not all students have the same life experiences, priorities, or fluidity in their schedules as I have or as I had as a student. Also, providing an opportunity to hear all voices, perspectives, and opinions. I have created a few courses that ask students to develop rules for the classroom in their introduction discussions. Respect and open-mindedness always come up. Students recognize that there will be differences of opinions and differences in experiences. Hearing one another to listen and with understanding rather than judgment, even if we do not agree, is brought up in almost every class. As instructors, we also need to show respect for our students. Now that we've learned about trauma-informed educational practices, how do we relate this all to the culture of care? Now that we've talked about various methods to incorporate into an online classroom to create a more trauma-informed environment, let's talk about how this applies to the culture of care. The culture of care fosters a community grounded in trust and belonging. When creating a culture that cares, it is believed that it will provide opportunities for individuals to thrive academically, professionally, and personally, creating a transformative student experience. By providing a classroom that is set up from a trauma-informed perspective and using techniques throughout the course instruction that reflect trauma-informed practices, we create a classroom that is set up to help students be successful. This creates an environment where students feel comfortable taking risks, can learn from their mistakes, and feel supported and connected to the instructor as well as other students. We try to take some of the stress out of the educational experience. Lessening stress can decrease the chance or impact of trauma coming out in the classroom. Students recognize their own strengths and the impact of their prior knowledge and experience in developing meaningful dialogue to not only help their learning, but also their peers to understand various perspectives. Looking at how we can create connections, have a little fun, promote a perspective of growth, as well as prepare a space where students, their knowledge, and their expertise feel valued, can demonstrate a culture of care environment that also respects the paths the students took to get to the classroom. Each student is treated as an individual with different needs, and we work to understand their needs within the context of the classroom and work with students to promote success. By doing all of this automatically instead of reactively, instructors can create an environment where students feel safe and do not feel the need to disclose trauma or its impact. A trauma-informed classroom helps all students feel safety of the culture of care. Students feel supported, safe, valued, and connected. It demonstrates that the instructor sees the student as a whole, not just their academics, their reactions, or their trauma. It shows that instructors understand what the student brings in, the richness of experiences and thoughts, recognizes students' resilience, power, and strengths. I hope you take away from this experience a little bit of information on a trauma-informed classroom and how you can incorporate care into your everyday practices. Thank you. If you're interested in learning more about trauma and creating a trauma-informed classroom, here are a list of references used to create this presentation.